Hi, everyone. Welcome to our NCAA webinar. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day to hang out with us and learn a little bit more about the NCAA eligibility process, and not just the NCAA eligibility process, really just the process for any student athlete that might be thinking that they want to play in college, because we've got lots of different things to share today. And I'm going to start by I'm going to share my screen so that I can open up my PowerPoint presentation and share with you some of the things. Oh, hang on, got a little ahead of myself. Okay, so to start with, let's see if I can move this out of the way. Okay, there we go. To start with, I just want to let you know that our webinar is not just covering NCAA. We are going to talk about quite a few different options for sports, so that if your student is interested in sports a lot and is really hoping to spend their careers focused on that, then they have some options. If they just enjoy their sport and aren't really ready to quit playing after high school, then there are some options for that too. So I thought that that's where we would start today. So we're going to be kind of general about it, but I wanted to start out telling you a little bit about me. I was a college Division I student athlete myself. I played 4 years of college softball at the Division I level at Ball State University in Indiana. And so I've walked the path that your students are hoping to walk or considering walking. And it was a blessing to me. It was challenging and it grew me as a person, but I'm so thankful for the years that I had to learn how to juggle, multiple things while I was in college. There were just a lot of wonderful lessons that I learned. And so I think that it's a benefit for any student athlete who's considering this. I think there are so many positives and good things to learn. I did study sport administration in college, and I have both a bachelor's and a master's in that. So I have done lots of different things within sports, but the ones that are most related to what I do now is, while I was a graduate assistant getting my master's degree, I worked in the student athlete course planning and counseling department. So I actually did help college student athletes plan their courses, find college professors that would work better with their schedules, because traveling is complicated when you are a student athlete. A lot of times you have to miss class. And we also just did counseling when it came down to like grades and making sure that students were successful. So that is very similar to kind of what I assist families with now with Home Life Academy. I do have 5 of my own kids. None of them are grown yet. They're all still at home. And we've been homeschooling in our family for about 10 years. So I'm right there with you. And I spend most of my mornings trying to work and catch up on emails. Then I take a break in the middle of the day to work with my own kids homeschooling. And then I usually log back on in the evening. So just to kind of give you an idea of my schedule, sometimes if you email me or call in the middle of the day, I'll do my best to get back to you by the next day or within a few days, depending on if it's a weekend or if I'm out of the office, something like that. I have been working at Home Life Academy for a year and a half as the student athlete counselor, and I do general eligibility, but we wanted to focus most on the NCAA and the sports side of things for this webinar, so that you would kind of have an idea of all the things that we're looking at when we're assisting your family. To start out, I just want to talk a little bit about the different options. The most popular one that everyone's always heard of is the NCAA. That's the one that televises games on TV, and those are the big scholarships that everyone hears about. And it's probably the one that you know the most about, because it's the most typical option that people discuss. This is a member-led organization, and it's dedicated to the well-being of athletes. Really, their success is what NCAA cares about. They want to see that they're going to go on and be successful after school. They have different divisions. Division I is the most commonly understood division. Everybody kind of understands that one because it's the one that you watch football and basketball games on television. It's the one with the most highly publicized athletes, all of those details. Division II is another excellent option. Typically, these schools are a little bit smaller, and same thing for Division III. Those schools can be a little bit smaller, and we're going to talk a little bit about each of the divisions in a minute. But if NCAA doesn't fit the bill for your student athlete, there are other excellent options. NAIA is the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics. These schools are typically a little bit smaller. They might be similar to a Division II or a Division III size school. A lot of times they are focused a lot on character-driven development of the student athlete, and they try really hard to focus on balancing the student athlete experience along with balancing playing their sport and successfully completing college so that they can go on in the future. And the final most common one, there are a few others, but these three are kind of the most common, is the NCCAA. And that one gets a little tricky because it sounds like NCAA, but this is the National Christian College Athletic Association. These schools are typically Christ-centered. They usually have a mission to use athletic competition in order to help the student grow educationally and in evangelism, and they try their best to encourage students to use their gifts for Christ. So a lot of times these schools are going to look like that. So let's talk just a little bit, let's see here, about the divisions for NCAA, the one that's the most common, the ones that you typically hear the most about. In order to compete at NCAA Division I or II, there are very specific things that you have to meet so that you will be qualified as an eligible athlete when it comes to participation. The Division III also has requirements, but NCAA doesn't man those quite as detailed, is how I would describe it. Division I, the academic requirements are listed in this link, and I'm going to click on it now, but hopefully if you have questions about this later, I can share some of these links with you. For Division I in particular, they require that you have 4 years of English, 3 years of math that is Algebra 1 or higher, 2 years of natural or physical science, and one of those years needs to have a lab included. And then 1 year of any of the previous options. So you can add an extra year of English, of math, or natural and physical science. And then they also want to see at least 2 years of social studies and really any other 4 years of any other course area that could include foreign language, comparative religion, philosophy, things like that. Most electives are not considered by NCAA. They don't review those, and we're going to talk about the core course worksheet process just a little bit. But they don't review those exactly. They talk most about core courses. And when you're thinking core courses, you're really thinking the basic courses that we see on a typical transcript. So math, English, science, social studies, foreign language. And then again, they do have a couple of extras that they allow, which are comparative religion and philosophy. But the ones that we usually are dealing with are those basics: English, math, science, social studies, and foreign language. To be a full qualifier, you have to complete at least 16 courses in those core areas. And 7 of the 10 need to be in English, math, or natural or physical science. You have to have a strong GPA of at least a 2.3, and you have to earn an SAT or combined ACT score that matches the sliding scale, which I'm going to slide down and show you in a minute. I did want to throw out there that right now, because of the pandemic, NCAA is waiving the requirement for SAT and ACT, which makes it that much more important that that GPA is really strong. So let's slide down here just a little bit. And this is kind of going to show you the sliding scale. So the idea here, it's a little confusing because some of the ACT scores look kind of strange. But the general idea is the higher that your GPA is, the lower your test scores can be, and it's okay that they'll still let you be an academic qualifier. So here you can see if a student has a 3.55 GPA, they could score only a 400 on the SAT and still be considered a qualifier. The ACT sum is the one that gets a little confusing. They're talking about a 37 there, and that sounds really high, but they're talking about adding up all the scores on the ACT. So really in the end, that is a very low score if you were to add them all up instead of just giving a median score like they typically do on ACT. This information here is so helpful if you want to spend some extra time looking it over yourself. That is excellent. It's got a lot of great information that is really helpful to learn as a parent if your child's thinking about Division I. I'm going to jump down and do the same sheet for Division II, and you'll see that there are a few differences. For Division II, the requirements are not quite as strenuous. Really, they're looking for 3 years of English, 2 years of math, algebra 1 or higher, 2 years of a natural or physical science, and then they are a little less picky and say that you can get your other core courses, any 3 years of those in English, math, or science. They're not as picky. They still want 2 years of social studies and then 4 years of any of the extras like foreign language, comparative religion, or philosophy. The same thing down here, the GPA is not quite as strenuous for Division II, but you still have to have those 16 core courses. That is still required. It's just the way that you go about getting those core courses is a little bit more flexible in Division II than it is in Division I. Here again is the sliding scale, and you can see that that GPA doesn't have to be quite as high to still qualify, even if you have a lower ACT or SAT score. And the sliding scale can be a little confusing. So if you have questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. A lot of times with our homeschool families, this doesn't turn out to be a problem because most of the students that we have are easily meeting the grade point average requirements. And so if their scores aren't awesome, they usually are still much better than these low requirements. So typically our families care the most about the core course worksheet process. And that's the part that can be just a little overwhelming, but hopefully we can help you rest assured that I'm available here. And if you have questions, I can kind of talk you through that. We'll talk a little bit more about it later in the webinar. The last requirements, I didn't include a link here because Division III, the only thing NCAA cares about, you still do have to create an NCAA account. But if you create that account and end up doing Division III, you just have to meet the standards for the school where you hope to attend. So your student athlete would need to make sure that they follow the rules for any school that they would be interested in attending or that is recruiting them. So in that case, as long as they meet the school's rules, then NCAA doesn't really step in and deem that they could be academically ineligible or academically eligible. Down at the bottom, I do want to note that sometimes Division I or Division II or Division III schools might have more strenuous requirements than NCAA. It doesn't happen often, but it is important that you're always paying attention. If you have an idea about where you might want to attend, that you're paying attention to their course requirements, or if your student is hoping to attend and study something really specific, you might need to know what courses are required to apply for those programs, things along those lines. Let's see here. Oh, and I just got a question here that said, can we share the web links? We absolutely can. We are planning on doing the web links at the end. Let's see here. There we go. We're planning on doing the web links at the end, or you can reach out to me. There are quite a few other web links that are going to be shown in this webinar. And so at the end, if you have questions about it, reach out to me through email. My email is Crystal, CRYSTAL, @homelifeacademy.com. And I would be happy to share with you all the links that I have in this webinar because there are some really helpful ones. So the next thing that you want to consider when you're talking about NCAA is that they have kind of a specific timeline that they like for families to follow or student athletes to follow. Here, this gives you kind of a quick glance if you're thinking Division I or Division II, which are the two that require core course worksheets. This will take you to this, and it gives you kind of a breakdown of both Division I and Division II at the same time. And then you can also see a picture here that shows sort of the timeline that they prefer. One of their recommendations that you can see on the screen right now is they suggest a good way of getting all 16 core courses in is that you take the 4 main core courses of English, math, science, and social studies all 4 years, and it easily meets that 16 credit requirement. A lot of times, if you're planning on going to college, student athletes will have also studied a foreign language because most schools require that. So it's really a good idea to have this 4x4 because it helps you meet those requirements, and then you have a little cushion as well with those foreign language requirements. So this gives you a general idea. It's not a requirement. You don't have to take social studies and science every single year if you don't want. Maybe your student really loves science and they, you know, take more science classes than other students. That's okay with us and with NCAA. This just gives you kind of a general guideline. It's a good way of thinking about it if you're heading into planning and all the things that you're looking at. If your student's like a 9th grader, that gives a good example. So back over here in 9th grade, families want to start planning. Don't panic if you're in 10th or 11th or 12th. There is still time. We can still walk through all the steps. It's just helpful in 9th grade to start thinking about it because there are a lot of steps, and it makes it feel a little less stressful if you can start earlier. It also helps us at HLA to have a good idea of who's interested and to help give you all the information you might need. So even if you're not certain your student will end up going this path, it's a really helpful thing to go ahead and select the NCAA path on their course planning on the Apple Core when you enter their courses, just so that we have an idea when we do transcript reviews that you might be interested in this, and that will help us to look for things that might be a problem for NCAA, or that we might want to share with you some extra information or details or things that come up, because sometimes in the process there are changes, just like this year. And I'm going to talk about those in a little bit as well. But in 9th grade, you want to talk to your HLA counselor, which is going to be me, and you're going to want to ask any beginning questions. You're going to want to click through some of the links that I've shared and just get a feeling for how you are, what things are going to be required. A lot of times NCAA suggests that you go ahead and enroll, create an Eligibility Center account. That's definitely not required, but if you register early, it just helps you see the task list because they create a task list for you on that website. And so that's a good time to do it, but 10th grade, 11th grade is fine as well. In 10th grade, they suggest definitely by 10th grade, it's a great idea. If you've thought ahead and your student athlete looks like they might be interested, definitely go ahead and get signed up. If you're an 11th or 12th grade family and you've just realized that there's a chance for this, again, it's okay. We have time. We'll work through it, but the sooner the better. That's kind of what we like to share. At this point in time, you are going to monitor your account and look at the tasks that they give. Just like in 9th grade, you're going to want to consider core course worksheets. Some families like to do those as they go. It helps them to remember all the details that they've done each year in each of the courses, because it's hard to remember everything when you get to that 12th grade year and you're trying to remember, what did we do 4 years ago when they were in 9th grade? It's sometimes a little challenging. So it's a good idea to at least make notes and keep track of the things that you covered in each of your core courses, so that when it comes time to create core course worksheets, it's not so overwhelming. In 11th grade, you're going to check in with me a lot more often. You're going to be looking at your NCAA account, and you're going to be starting to create core course worksheets, because typically we turn those in by the end of 11th grade, in between 11th and 12th grade. If your student does take an ACT or SAT, and right now, if you have an 11th or 12th grader, they may not need that for the future, but 9th and 10th graders might still need it when the pandemic has passed, hopefully sooner rather than later. But for now, that one is something that they're waiving. If you have an ACT or SAT score, it's still great. It's very helpful to add on and share with NCAA. And then you just need to send it to them by using the 9999 code. When you register with the ACT or SAT, you will just have it sent to them by using that code. At the end of that year, we will provide an official transcript, and we send that to you. In the past, so our families who've done this a long time, if you're on here with us today, this has changed with just in the last month. NCAA realized that a lot of families are switching to homeschooling, and they were realizing that there are lots of new options that haven't been available in the past before so many people switched to homeschooling after the pandemic began. And so they are no longer requiring umbrella schools to be registered with NCAA and having our own student portal. They will happily still accept our transcripts, and they're glad to have them. They've seen them a lot of times. We've had a lot of student athletes graduate from Home Life Academy and successfully go on to participate in sports. So they are happy to have our transcripts. They know them and they're very familiar. But instead of us uploading them like we did in the past, we will forward those and we'll create them and send them on to you, and then you'll send it on to NCAA by using the ec-processing@ncaa.org. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later too. And if you need clarification about any of this, I'm always happy to answer questions. I know I'm moving through it kind of fast. I see a couple questions up here. Let's see what we have here. Okay, somebody asked about where to find a core course worksheet. I'm going to take you in just a second over to the NCAA resources, and you can find them there or in the homeschool toolkit. So I'll share that with you in just a second. And then they're asking about foreign languages, and they want to know about Latin. Yes, Kristen, Latin is fine. You have to be careful on foreign languages. The tricky part about Latin or any foreign language is they want to see, NCAA wants to see that you're doing grammar and speaking at the same time. They don't want to see, that's the Rosetta Stone gets denied pretty often because of the fact that it shows that they're just doing speaking. They're not focusing on the grammar portion of a foreign language. For Latin, I don't know that there even is a Rosetta Stone, but Henley Latin, if you're looking at doing Latin, Henley seems to be the most consistently approved. I think there are others out there. I think Visual Latin has had pretty good success rates. But usually the thing to consider if you're doing any foreign language is just make sure you're doing some sort of grammar workbook or grammar work along with learning how to speak the language, because NCAA cares a lot about that. Another thing they consider in every course across the board is it matters a lot to them that you are doing college prep, which means that you are taking a course that is classified as a high school college prep course. So once in a while we run into trouble. I think Memoria Press has some Latin that talks about, oh, you can do it if you're third grade and up. And even though it's equally challenging for high schoolers and even adults, they sometimes will not approve that because it lists that it's a possibility for third grade and up. So that's why Henley is good. If you choose a Memoria Press option, Henley is good because it lists that it's for high school students. So that kind of helps out. Let's see here. Back to the eligibility timeline. 12th grade is when it gets pretty serious. I think 11th grade families are usually pretty aware of what the next steps are going to be, but 12th grade, everything's sort of finishing up. If you haven't already submitted core course worksheets for the 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, it's a good time to do that. You're going to finish up all of the core courses that you need to take. So typically by this point, you know, students have quite a few of them done, and they'll finish up the 2 or 3 or 4 classes that they still need. If you need to, you can take the ACT or SAT again and again, send it to NCAA by using that 9999 code. And then after April 1st, you can request the final amateurism certificate, or the decision from NCAA. One thing I like to note here is that sometimes it feels to our families, they'll submit everything, and then it feels like it just sits there. The key to that is making sure that if you have a coach that's interested in your student athlete, make sure that that coach reaches out to NCAA and requests an eligibility status, because that's what kicks it into the review process. As long as it's sitting there with just your information submitted, they won't review it. But once a coach wants to know a decision, then they do review it. So if you have a coach that's interested, once you have everything in, let them know it's ready for you to check on, and then NCAA will figure out a status so that you can move forward and know if you've been approved. And then at the end of 12th grade, you are just going to reach out to me for a final transcript that shows your graduation date. Sometimes they ask for a high school letter, a start date letter. They want to know when you began your freshman year, but that's kind of sporadic. They don't always ask for that. Sometimes they do, it just depends. So that's one that's possible. And then now a new thing that's required. In the past, this wasn't, but with these new changes where the umbrella schools don't have necessarily an approved school in the system, they are requiring all homeschoolers to complete the accordance statement. So that should pop up on one of your task lists within NCAA. And when it comes down to that accordance statement, you're going to fill it out because you are the organizer of your homeschool. If you have questions about that, we're happy to answer them. But in the end, you're the person grading and administering the exams and the homework. And in a lot of cases, even if you're not teaching the classes, you're organizing and planning everything for your students. So you're the person who's going to be that administrator. Okay, on to the next, on to the next slide. Here are some more helpful links. So the links that I was telling you about earlier that matter, I'm going to take you first to the Eligibility Center. This is where you're going to be able to find every link under the sun. There is a lot of information here. Some information won't apply to you because your student isn't attending a public or private high school. They are homeschooled. Even though Home Life Academy is a private school, your student is classified with NCAA as a homeschooler. So the really important ones to pay attention to is the homeschool information sheet right here. And within that sheet, I'll click on it. I'm going to take you to a few of these others. The one that I think is probably the most important for most of our families is the toolkit, the homeschool toolkit. And this is just a guide that tells you all the specifics that you're going to want to pay attention to if you are making plans for your student to play sports in college. It talks about Core Course Worksheets. You can access those here. So right here, we're going to talk about, this one's the non-traditional. That one's just a little bit different. Here's a Core Course Worksheet. This gives you an example of what things they're going to want to know in your Core Course Worksheets. They're going to want to know details about your student athlete, the course name, the grade they took this course. Make sure you mark what subject area it's in. The teacher of record is typically you, sometimes the parent. Sometimes you'll have a co-op teaching it or a tutorial, and that's okay. You can list that, or you can list yourself as the teacher of record and then list the tutorial teacher as the other teacher. That's okay. Prerequisites. This is just talking about like Algebra 2 has a prerequisite of Algebra 1 and geometry. If there is a course, sometimes like physics usually requires that the student has taken or is taking Algebra 2. So if there is a prerequisite that would be required, you're going to want to list it here. NCAA really loves textbooks. I know homeschoolers don't always thrive with textbooks. We do a lot of living learning and things that are outside of the book, but textbooks are, they kind of understand them. A lot of times the NCAA staff is not necessarily super well versed in homeschool options. So if you're using a textbook, make sure you list it here. If you're talking about the curriculum provider, so a good example would be maybe you're doing science and so you use Apologia, and so you're just going to list that there, that Apologia is the provider for that curriculum. Then the course description can usually be found on the website for that curriculum. Sometimes it's in the textbook or in some of the other books that you might be using. You can kind of find a course description. If not, you can make up your own. A class that seems to have families that are a little bit more flexible is English. A lot of times families will make up their own English courses. They'll pull out literature and assign writing assignments. And in that case, then you can just write up your own course description. It doesn't have to come from a textbook. It's just that we know in past experience that NCAA just tends to understand textbooks just a little bit easier than some of the outside the box thinking that we have as homeschool families. The course content and goals and outline. A lot of times what I recommend to our families is you go to the chapter titles if you're using a textbook and list them here. So it basically gives a rundown of every topic that you've covered in that course. If you created your own, you can explain those details here. Sometimes these are really detailed. This box is really detailed. Sometimes it's shorter. It just sort of depends on what things you covered. But my recommendation is to be as detailed as you can be on these. The more detail, the better. It leaves less up for question when NCAA is looking at it and reviewing it. The great news is there are a lot of families that are homeschooling these days. And so a lot of the things we're doing are more common. But it's still great to have more information rather than less. That way it leaves them with no questions. When they're talking about assessments, we're kind of looking over, you know, what are you grading them on? Are you using tests? Are you doing projects? Are you doing regular homework? Those kinds of things. If they're asking about the assessments and how they're designed, it's in some cases, it might be you creating an assessment. Maybe you created a writing project or a different project. Maybe you're just following the curriculum provider and you can just list that here. Tell who is grading the assessment. And then the other part that seems to confuse families just a little bit is when they ask what the grade is based on. What they really want to see is a breakdown of a percentage of what amount is used to decide the grade. That's kind of strange to say, but what they want to see is, oh, we used 50% of homework and we used 40% of tests and 10% of projects. And that's how we came up with the grade. If you didn't necessarily break it down that way, that's okay. Just give a general idea of what you think you might have done. They're not going to go back in and check on it. Oh, is that exactly how they graded? They're not looking at it that detail. They're just wanting to see when you are making a plan for your class, you know, what was weighted the most important? Was it the tests? Was it the projects? Was it the homework? Things like that. And then in the end, you just give the grade and sign off to say that you did all of these things. And from there, you can go on. The rest of the time here, they're going to talk through a lot of these other details for the sake of the homeschool toolkit. And that is a resource that can take a little while to get through, but I highly recommend you reviewing it because it has a lot of great information for our families and requirements for our families so that you can kind of get a better idea of what to expect if you're new, or maybe you're right in the middle of the core course worksheet process. And this is a great place to kind of go through and pull things together so that you're prepped when it's time to create core course worksheets. We've talked about a few of these. The guide for the college-bound student athlete is excellent. I'm not going to click on it. It's a huge guide, very similar to the homeschool toolkit. I think it's really helpful, but I think the most helpful for our students is the NCAA toolkit, and I've already clicked on that one to show you. And then the other websites here are the NAIA Eligibility Center. They do have an Eligibility Center process. It is not as strenuous as NCAA. They care the most at NAIA about your test scores if you're a homeschool student. And so they want to make sure you do still have to turn in transcripts, and Home Life Academy is still able to upload transcripts on the NAIA site as of right now. So if you have a student athlete who's planning to play NAIA, then reach out to us and we can help you with that process. If it turns out that they can't, that, you know, a lot of times what matters the most on this side of things is that you list Home Life Academy as your school when you're starting out. So instead of listing that your student's homeschooled, you're going to list that Home Life Academy is their school on NAIA. For NCAA, you can list that you're a homeschooler because now they don't clarify for the sake of umbrella schools. You don't list that as your school any longer. But that is a new change. If you've been with us and already listed Home Life Academy as your school, don't panic. I think NCAA is taking care of that on their end. They aren't making a lot of changes there. But if you're new, then you'll know that you can list homeschool for NCAA, but for NAIA, you're going to want to list that Home Life Academy as your school. Let's see, back to this. The NCCAA does not have a specific Eligibility Center process. So this just takes you to their site and gives you some information about schools that are in this conference and schools that are, you know, things that you might consider outside of NCAA or NAIA that tend to be the more typical ones. This gives you just a wider range of schools and options, just in case your student athlete might not want to compete at one of those other options. This just gives you an idea of the things that might be expected. back over here. And I think one of the most important websites that is a really great place to start is at our website. So I'm going to take you there and we're going to talk. There's two different places that you can go to get information. The scholarships, awards, and recognitions page has a little spot down here. If you scroll down, the NCAA and NAIA scholarships. So that gives some important information that you might want to pay attention to. If you forget some of the things I tell you in the webinar today, this is a great place to go. And then the link that Jay shared at the beginning is the link to our NCAA Path page. For those of you who have been with us for a while, this information has recently changed because we are in the process of learning the details that NCAA is requiring now that they are not having umbrella schools listed as a specific school. And again, the great news is that they are happy to still accept our transcripts. And the best news is that this gives homeschoolers so much more flexibility than they had in the past. When they were required to attend a school that had been approved, it made it complicated if students had transferred from different situations. And so the best news for our students is that there will be a lot more flexibility in the future about what will be approved. And so we were thrilled for that. Even if that meant we can't necessarily upload transcripts, it's still a benefit for our students. And we were glad to see that it was going to give homeschoolers more options. And we're excited to see what that means with the NCAA. And so this could be changing. We're still learning the steps. They literally just changed it within the month. And so we're kind of learning the process too, and the requirements and the things that we're going to need, but we have been doing it with a few families. And so we're starting to get the feel for it. Let's head back over to our thing. So then my last slide just kind of gives you a rundown of what we're doing for you if you have a student athlete. As a counseling team and as staff, we are trying to stay up to date on NCAA eligibility and changes in information. And so I'm researching that regularly. I get information from NCAA consistently. They do consider us still a school. And so they do notify me when things change and shift. We're offering webinars kind of sporadically, hopefully maybe more often now that we're getting the hang of some of these NCAA changes. We do offer counseling. So when it comes time to fill out Core Course Worksheets or work on that Eligibility Center account, I'm here and I've walked lots of families through that process before. And so I'm happy to answer any questions. Typically, it's not something new that we're seeing when you're looking at it, but it might be something new that you're seeing on your end, but we've helped other families. So that's good. We've just done it and seen what they require or what they recommend. So that is very helpful because we see it on a pretty consistent basis. We also assist your family early on with planning for the courses you're going to need. Since NCAA cares a lot about the core courses, we can help you plan the courses that you would be making, so that your student is on track for NCAA requirements. We also do transcript reviews for our 11th and 12th grade students. And when we're doing those reviews, we are sharing information about courses that maybe we know NCAA doesn't prefer or tends to deny. That way you can make changes if necessary. Anytime you have questions before a transcript review, you can always just shoot me an email and say, hey, we were thinking about this for math or science, and we wanted to see if that one's a normal one for NCAA. Do they usually like it? Do they not? I'm happy to shoot back a quick email and say, oh, that one's one they've seen a lot, or no, that's not one they've done very often. We will do a review of Core Course Worksheets. So if you're getting ready to submit them and you just want somebody else's eyes on them, because I think that this feels like the most overwhelming part of the process, is that it feels like a lot is riding on these Core Course Worksheets. Your student has worked so hard and done all these great things. And it feels, I think, to the moms and dads, like if I mess this up, I mess up their chances. So if you just want somebody to kind of look them over and make sure that they look like what we've seen in the past, we're happy to do that. You can send it to me anytime. I just kind of review it for things I know NCAA prefers. I can't guarantee that it will be approved, but I do have an idea of things that they look for. So I can look for those keywords, I can look for key descriptions, or maybe check for your details just to make sure that you're giving good information on that sheet so that NCAA will be more likely to approve it, and that you won't be scrambling at the end. And then we also provide transcripts. We do a review, like I mentioned before, in 11th and 12th grade, so that you're keeping up on making sure that the courses that your students taking are going to be typically approved NCAA things. And then when it's time, when you're ready for transcripts in 11th and 12th grade, we will create those, send them over to you, and then you can forward them on to NCAA so that you can check off those tasks on your NCAA list. It looks like I have a couple of questions here, so I'm just going to go down the list. Okay, Shannon asked, do you need to do core course worksheets for dual enrollment classes, and do those count towards the 16 core courses? Excellent question. That one is a wonderful thing to note. Dual enrollment courses are considered college prep because they are college classes, and NCAA approves those almost immediately as long as it's a 100 level course or higher. In those situations, you don't have to fill out core course worksheets. And so a lot of our juniors and seniors really capitalize on that. That means that moms and dads only have to fill out core course worksheets for 9th and 10th grade. And then they try their very best to get students to take 11th and 12th grade courses through dual enrollment, because then it's less core courses that are required. So that was a great question, Shannon, and they do count towards your 16 core course credits. Let's see here. The next question was from Kelly. Kelly's asking, if your child's goal is NCAA, but they select an NAIA school their senior year, all the prep you've done for the NCAA, will it just roll over, or should you be looking at both the whole time? So another super question, Kelly. If you are prepping for NCAA, you've been doing a lot of the things that you need for NAIA, because NAIA is just a lot less. They have a lot less requirements. Really what they want to see is the final score for an ACT or SAT, and the transcript that shows what they completed. And as long as they have that solid ACT score or SAT score, then going forward, the student doesn't run into problems. In some occasions, if your student is having trouble, I believe the score for ACT, I don't know it off the top of my head for SAT, but I think that NAIA wants to see at least a 20 or higher and for an ACT. And if a student's having a hard time with that, there is another process that you can walk through for NAIA eligibility. It requires a lot of recommendation letters. It does ask for some information about courses. So if you've been keeping track of that with NCAA, then you should be set. You just have to get some recommendation letters. And I have some details about that. So if you're having questions specifically, feel free to reach out to me, and I will be happy to share the information that I have about NAIA and the specifics. Okay, let's see here. I have Stephen, regarding the core course worksheets, the advice is to begin filling them out in 9th grade. My 9th grade student currently takes all core courses through the Home Life Learning Online, and I plan to keep it that way for 4 years. The core courses in this program have excellent course overviews and curriculum skill topics to refer to. Is this information still available to a parent of an HLL online student after the course is completed? Yes, they are. And if for some reason you don't have access, or if you have a hard time locating it, reach out to me, because our HLL team, they are a separate school, but they can get that information to us or to you very easily. We've had quite a few families go the HLL route. The great part about that is it's using a really typical NCAA approved curriculum often. It's not a guarantee. Again, we can never guarantee that they're going to be approved for sure, but NCAA has seen it a lot. So the good news is that if you're planning on going that route the whole time, then that information should be available, or you can start get ahead right now and start creating core course worksheets and just keeping them in a file for the future. Okay, here. Okay, Beth. Hi, Beth. I actually, you are telling me that you've got, and you wanted to email me, and I was going to try to call you too. So hopefully once this webinar is over, I'll give you a shout back, and we'll see if we can chat through all of your questions, because she just said she had a lot of questions. So we'll work through those after the webinar is over. Okay, Mary Lee, let's see. Dual credit. How do you list high school algebra and the dual credit college algebra on the same transcript? Are all college dual credit math classes considered higher than Algebra 1? Yes, great question. College algebra is considered different than Algebra 1, even though some of the same concepts are covered. Anytime you're taking a college anything, they are considering that a separate course. So it's okay if you have Algebra 1 listed for your core course worksheets, and then later you do a dual enrollment college algebra. And in fact, students who don't really want to do pre-calculus or calculus, we recommend dual enrollment very strongly. We say that that's a great way of going ahead, doing the extra college prep math, but it's still doing that algebra that they're interested in, especially when students don't have any plans to do any sort of math studies in college. If they're not planning on majoring in math, then it's completely fine to go ahead and jump in and do dual enrollment that way. Is it possible to apply to NCAA for a non-USA resident or citizen that is an HLA student? Yes, Laura, it is. I work with quite a few of our global families that are hoping for their student athletes to come and play in the United States. And we've had quite a bit of success. There are some extra details for our international students that they have to meet because they're international, but we can still provide transcripts. We can still walk you through the core course worksheet process. All of those details that we've talked about today in this webinar are the same for our international students and our United States residents. There are, like I said, just a few extra details for the international students, but if you have questions about that, please feel free to email me or call me and we can talk about international students. I'll point you in the right direction to the international student link so that you can kind of dig through those as well. All right, so it looks like I've caught up on questions. Let's see here. Let me make sure that I can see a few people put things in the chat. So let's make sure I didn't miss anything. Sheets for dual enrollment. I think most things were covered. Oh, okay. One question I do see here that's a little different is, can you fill out the core course worksheets online? And yes, the core course worksheet that I showed you in the webinar is a document that I believe it's a Word document. I'm not certain about that. There might be a PDF option for as well, but it's really recommended that you fill it out online because the boxes, the text boxes will grow as you put information in. And if you're filling it out by hand, then those text boxes, you know, it can be tricky to fit all the important information into those tiny boxes. So we recommend that families type that in. And I do have just a link to the core course worksheet by itself without it being in the toolkit. So if you need that, just let me know. I think that might be listed in the NCAA resources as well. But if you can't find it, I'm happy to send it to you. I have a few of them saved, not completed ones, but blank ones that you can always use. So there's the chat. Okay, so that is the end of, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay. That's the end of my slideshow. If you have further questions, I love chatting with our families who have homeschool athletes that are hoping to go this path, because I walked that path myself. So it's a lot of fun to relive it with our students and their families. And I'm so happy to answer any questions you have. I know sometimes this process can feel really overwhelming. It can feel really nerve-wracking, maybe a little bit like you're on your own, because maybe the other homeschool families, you know, they might not know the process like you know it, and so that's complicated. But just know that you have a cheerleader here at Home Life Academy, and that you have somebody who has walked through this. And we have a few counselors who have done this. So if there's something I run into that I don't know or that I'm not sure about, I have a few people I can reach out to, and I have contacts at a lot of the organizations that are happy to answer my questions so that I can help you the best that I can. If we don't have any other questions, then I think we'll wrap it up for today. And then feel free to reach out to me directly. I think that Jay might have just posted it, but my email address is Crystal, CRYSTAL, @homelifeacademy.com. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have anytime about this process, or about core course worksheets, or any of those details. Okay. Thanks so much for attending.